In the Three Body Problem novels, Ye and her colleague, Yang Weining, are actually husband and wife. He is the true father of her daughter Vera, and their relationship, though quiet and understated, provides one of the few instances in her life where kindness appears without calculation. Shortly after she transmits the invitation to the Trisolarans, her superior Lei Jicheng discovers her actions. But instead of reporting the crime, he attempts to claim the discovery for himself. By doing so, he hopes to secure his political legacy, while making clear that any resistance would result in her execution. Ye, however, sees it in a very different way. She is not concerned about her own life. Her main concern is the effect this would have on Trisolaran intervention. If Lei survives, the alien signal will either be suppressed or co-opted by the ruling party she despised. In her reasoning, Lei's death becomes necessary, and so she engineers what appears to be an equipment failure that requires inspection along a cliff face, calculating that Lei will have to descend to repair it. The plan holds until her husband Yang, acting out of loyalty or simple decency, insists on assisting Lei and climbs down alongside him. At that moment, she faces the defining moral decision of her life, because eliminating Lei now requires eliminating the only person who has genuinely treated her with compassion. As the two men hang suspended above the abyss, she cuts through the nylon rope, sending them both into the rocky forest below. In the series, Vera Ye's decision to jump into the Cherenkov tank is left deliberately ambiguous. In the novels, however, she discovers an encrypted folder on her mother's computer where she learns the truth behind the Earth Trisolaris organization. The broken physics was not a natural anomaly, but a deliberate attack orchestrated by the very organization her mother led. For Vera, the revelation is devastating on two levels. What she believed to be a profound disruption in the foundations of physics turns out to be manipulation that current science can't circumvent. Even worse, she realizes that her mother's actions set humanity on a path toward extinction. The person she loved and trusted most becomes a traitor, not only to humanity's future, but to the scientific ideals that defined her own life. That convergence of professional collapse and personal betrayal becomes the final blow. The nanotech researcher Salazar, who is actually a male scientist in the novels, discovers a glowing countdown seared into the center of her photographs, rather than projected onto her retina. This distinction carries profound consequences, because a retinal hallucination could be dismissed as neurological dysfunction, whereas a photographic anomaly implicates the physical world itself. She responds as a disciplined scientist by first checking her digital camera for malfunction, replacing equipment, and eventually switching to an analog device to exclude digital corruption, only to find that the numbers persist. She then borrows cameras from colleagues to rule out hardware defects, and when the anomaly remains, she introduces a control condition by asking someone else to take the photograph. She observes that the image is clean when another person presses the shutter, yet marked by the countdown the moment she stands behind the lens again. What destabilizes her is not simply the existence of the phenomenon, but its conditional structure, because it behaves as though selective, following the observer in a way that suggests intention. When she is told that the stars themselves will blink for her, the event unfolds not as a theatrical sky-wide spectacle, but as a subtle modulation detectable only through sensitive instruments, while to the naked eye, the night sky remains stable and undisturbed. The cosmos appears to wink through data rather than visible light, confining the revelation to those equipped to measure it and thereby fracturing reality within the domain of observation itself. The horror is intellectual rather than visual, because the universe does not stage a display, but interferes with measurement at the most fundamental level. And for a scientist, that implication is more destabilizing than any hallucination could ever be. Before she was sent to Red Coast, Ye meets Bai Mulin in the Inner Mongolia Production and Construction Corps, where he works as a journalist for a state newspaper. Their connection forms through a shared interest in a clandestine copy of Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, a text considered politically dangerous in that climate. They agree that the actions of the organization are causing massive deforestation and accelerating the destruction of Earth's biosphere. What is never portrayed in the show, however, is that when Mulin decides to write a letter to the Central Committee criticizing the Construction Corps' actions, his hands are shaking from the cold, so Ye offers to help and transcribes the letter for him. To his complete surprise, the Central Committee frames the letter as treasonous. When authorities investigate, Bai deflects responsibility onto Ye, exploiting the fact that the handwriting is hers, thus making her become the author in the eyes of the state. Tragically, a gesture of intellectual kinship results in yet another wave of persecution. Unlike the Red Guards who killed her father, he was an intellectual who claimed to share her values. His betrayal proves to her that even those who see the truth are often corrupt and self-serving. The series never mentions Ye's sister Wenxue, yet in the novel their relationship forms one of the earliest and most decisive psychological ruptures of her life. The two sisters are raised by parents who rank among China's most brilliant physicists. Against this background, Wenxue's transformation during the Cultural Revolution is not a simple political shift, but a profound betrayal. She does not drift passively into the Red Guards. She embraces ideological fervor with conviction and publicly denounces science to which her father has devoted his life. What devastates Ye is not only the denunciation itself, but the fact that her sister fully understands what she is renouncing, having studied the elegance of Maxwell's equations, the predictive precision of celestial mechanics, and yet choosing to exchange that intellectual clarity for slogans and factional loyalty. Before their father was killed in the public struggle session, Wenxue was one of the students who wrote public denunciations against him, and she never apologized or showed regret. When Wenjie was sent to the labor camps in the freezing forest, she had no family support because her sister was too busy playing a revolutionary hero in a factional war against a rival group. After ideological persecution, betrayal, and isolation at Red Coast Base, Ye is sent to a remote mountain village to give birth. And in that unlikely setting, she encounters something that momentarily destabilizes the certainty she has constructed about humanity. The villagers who, despite being poor and politically marginal, share their limited food and ensure safety for both her and her newborn. In their presence, she is not a political instrument or suspected traitor, but simply a mother. This experience introduces a counterexample to the belief that led her to invite the Trisolarans to conquer Earth. She witnesses a form of human goodness, untouched by ideological cruelty and unmediated by calculation. She recognizes that if her entire life unfolded within such a community, she might never have pressed the button. Yet the realization arrives too late, since the signal is already traveling through space and cannot be recalled. It's the one moment where she almost regrets her choice. If you're fascinated by the dark forest idea, we have just published The Geometry of a Hostile Universe, which illustrates why the Great Silence may not be just a theory, but a physical inevitability. It skips the usual sociological tropes and instead starts with an intuitive exploration of relativistic motion and how it leads to a fundamentally hostile universe. For more, check the video description below.